welcome to the story of GTX Medical. We have been in the press quite actively last quarter. And before I continue, this was a publication our Chief Scientific Officer, Professor Cortine, had in Nature in October, and it was on the BBC News. So let's listen to them.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. A man who was told he would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair has walked again thanks to extraordinary work by scientists in Switzerland. The 30-year-old, who was left paralysed after a martial arts accident, has had an implant attached to his spine which boosts the signals from his brain to his legs. And incredibly, some of the damaged nerves have regrown.
This is David training with his implant a year ago. Stim on means it's turned on. When it's turned off, he can't move. Back on, and he continues to walk.
Yeah, there's nothing as the BBC at 6 who can say these things very concisely. So welcome to GTX. We are a company spun out of EPFL in Lausanne. We are based both in Lausanne and in the Netherlands. Now over 50 people. We have a strong IP position. And we have a strong consortium of investors that helped us since 2016. And we're focusing on incomplete spinal cord injured people. And just let me help you. Right now, people have a lesion, they fall a traffic accident, and they just have to live with their handicap or with their indication. There's no help. They have to learn how to get from their bed into the wheelchair and from the wheelchair in the car and vice versa. And the doctors can only tell them how to live with their handicap. At GTX Medical, we want to change that, and we really think that we are developing a new prosthetic therapy to make those people walk again. What we do is, let's see where this works. So we implant a pedal lead at the spinal cord, and we implant a pulse generator. And then we have an intensive rehabilitation training for these people, 2 hours a day, 4 times a week, 4 to 5 months. And then with that training, you really promote the neuroplasticity of the spinal cord to make those people walk again. If you look at the market, it's actually in staggering amounts. If you look at the prevalence, there are over 500,000 people in the US and Europe living with this condition. And the incidence of new injuries per year is in the order of 14,000 per year in Europe and the same amount in the US. So if you only look at our own, so the market size of the existing potential people with have a spinal cord injury is a staggering 20 billion. If you adjust for the penetration adjustments, the total market is in the order of 3 billion that we can access only with our first product. Of course, we are developing a new therapy, so there are quite some adoption risks which we have addressed by really a very high quality of clinical trials that we design and very precise patient selection. And also on the scaling, we really have a good, we require a good training program and training protocols to make sure that these people are trained in the best possible way. So this is an overview of our therapy, which, as I said, just starts with a very careful patient selection because these people need to be very motivated to endure the training for the 4 or 5 months. So there is a lot of interaction with the neurosurgeon. Then we have the implantation where we implant our dedicated lead and our dedicated pulse generator. And there is an electrophysiologist on board to make sure that the lead is properly placed. Then there is a mapping phase where we basically evaluate which electrode corresponds to which muscles, so we can make the right stimulation. And what is important to mention is that we have developed a closed loop system with sensors in the shoe so that we can synchronize the stimulation of the appropriate muscles at the right moment in the gait cycle. And with that system mapped and tuned, we go into this rehab phase, initially with a bodyweight support system to that supports part of the bodyweight support. I'll show you in a video in a minute. And then gradually towards lesser and less use of the bodyweight support towards the home training and home use, where that's of course the target in the end, to have those people walk at home. So how does it look like in detail? So we have sensors in the shoes, just standard sensors that detect the motion, so to see where the feet are. we have a controller that communicates with the pulse generator that's implanted, and that is then steering the pedal lead that's in the lower spinal cord. And these are the components that we developed, including a programmer, a clinician programmer, where you can very easily adjust the stimulation settings to adjust it to the walking patterns. Plus a patient programmer, a kind of watch where a patient can just start and stop the stimulation and select different modes. So important to note is that we have a closed loop system so that they really can get real-time feedback to stimulate the muscles at the right moment. And this is, I think, a first example of such a closed-loop system with direct real-time motion feedback. So we developed a kind of motion stimulator. Not to scare patients away too much with new technology, it's important to note that the technology itself is very similar to spinal cord stimulation that has been used already for ages for the treatment of chronic pain. So on the safety risk profile, there we're using technologies that are already being used for a long time. Let's show you what we did. So we are working with the group of Cortine in Lausanne, who have already done a feasibility study, actually not using our own implantable pulse generator and lead, but using a Medtronic system. So that has quite a number of limitations because it's very low latency, no independent frequencies, no stimulation ramping. And also the lead is actually too small. But nevertheless, while we're doing this product development, we can learn a lot from such a feasibility study that's done already in patients. So right now we've done 8 patients. So Cortine has published the first results of the first 3. Let me show you, this is patient number 2. He's an ACSC 28-year-old, and it's almost 7 years since the lesion. This is before training. And you see him walking, and you see that he's resting very much on his arms, and his left leg is completely paralyzed. So he basically stands on it, but then he really drags it along with every step. So this is with the condition he had before the implant. And this is David after 3 months of stimulation. Here you see the experiments where you stop the stimulation and he cannot walk again. If you put it on again, he walks. This is still with some bodyweight support. This is halfway during the training. And now I'll remind you of the following. So what we really do, and I can explain you more if you're interested, we really making the brain control the legs again. So what we've asked here, so we stimulate in certain intensity, and now we ask David to just try to lift off his left leg a bit higher, while we do not change anything on the stimulation. And remember, the left leg was paralyzed for 7 years. So here is stepping, stimulating, and now we are asking to lift up his leg. So now suddenly he is able, with his mind, to voluntarily adjust the movements of his formerly completely paralyzed leg. And this supports actually our mechanism that you really get this neuroplasticity inducing after a couple of months of intense training. So on our clinical studies, as I said, so Cortine is doing this feasibility study in one center, and that study is almost finished. What we're going to do next is to basically use a next study to validate our own lead, which is a bit bigger and longer. And we're also going to try this with early patients, because the expectation is if you do these kind of things immediately after the accident, so within 2 to 4 weeks, there is much less atrophiation of the muscles and the nervous system. So we think that we get even better results even there. So we're going to do that in 3 or 4 hospitals in the next 2 years with our own lead, still with the Medtronic IPG, in subacute and chronic patients. And then in we still need a little bit less than 2 years to finalize our complete product development. So in 2020, we'll start our multi-center study towards the CE mark in 4 to 6 centers and about 50 patients. We might do less if we can already include some of the data of this feasibility study over there, and in parallel go to US. You know that with the current uncertainty about the medical device regulations in Europe, we are now changing our strategy a bit more towards US focus to make sure that we can have our FDA approval as soon as possible as well. On the team, I think we have quite experienced leadership team. Cortine as a professor already, working on spinal cord injury for 15 years. Myself, had experience at Philips, Medtronic, and Sapiens, another startup I ran 5 years ago. Experienced the VP Clinical Regulatory, Marketing and Market Access, CTO, a lot of experience in electronics development, and also experienced CFO with a lot of financing experience. We have 2 advisory boards because we are both working with 2 different types of specialists. We have rehabilitation doctors responsible for rehab doctors for the spinal cord injured people, and a neurosurgery advisory board who has helped us also defining our lead. So going forward, it's my last slide. So we'll finalize our implantable neurostimulation system, the motion feedback in the next 2 years. We have a couple of studies going on to do the clinical validation, the STIMO2, and the GO2. Oops, sorry. And it's very important that we consolidate the interactions with key opinion leaders, both neurosurgeons, neurorehab specialists, and a lot of also neuromodulation scientists, because we're developing this new therapy, which has to be also accepted by the community. That's why also we interact a lot with the Christopher Reeves Foundation and the Wings for Life, so patient organizations that are very helpful in pushing this therapy forwards. We're currently preparing for a Series B financing round to basically, for the use of proceeds, to run a multi-center study in Europe to get our CE mark for the GO2 project, and in parallel implementing our US strategy, getting our RDE approval, getting US pivotal studies running over there. Thank you for your attention.